Thank you, Tim. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's great to be here and to provide an update on Kazia. This has been already a dramatic year for our company in 2021, and there's a great deal ahead in the remaining 4 months or so of the year. So I'm really going to provide just a high-level overview today of what we've been up to, what we're focused on, what our priorities are, and some of the really important news flow that we expect as we head through the remainder of the year. Next slide, please. And one more. Thank you. There's really 4 points I want to get across today, and they're summarized on this slide. And I think the first of them, as you see at the left here, is the quality of Kazia's pipeline. We have 2 cancer drugs in development. Both of them are or will shortly be in human trials. And that's really when the rubber hits the road for new cancer drugs. All the work we do in laboratories, all the mouse models, all that work is really preparatory. The point where drugs start to acquire value is when they get into human trials, into the clinic, as we say. Both of our drugs have crossed or are about to cross that threshold. And they're both very different drugs. They really give us a very nice diversification within our pipeline. This is not a one-trick pony. This is not a case of all our eggs in one basket. 2 very different drugs, very different kinds of use for patients. And that gives us a real nice diversification in terms of the company's business. And both of these drugs potentially lead to valuable commercial opportunities, as touched on here. Our lead drug, which is called Paxallasim, is currently in a phase 3 study for glioblastoma. That's the most common and the most aggressive form of brain cancer. And that alone is about a $1.5 billion commercial opportunity, $1.5 billion per annum in sales for glioblastoma. But that drug has potential uses way beyond glioblastoma. And then our second drug, which is called EVT-801, has potential applications in a wide range of cancers, from kidney cancer to lung cancer, liver cancer. So these are not niche products. These are drugs with very substantial potential markets. And we've already begun to realize some of this value. When we talk about the commercial opportunity for our drugs, we're not talking about hypotheticals. We realized $15 million of partnering revenue in the first half of calendar 2021. And that really demonstrates that other companies are starting to recognize the value of what we're doing. We're starting to monetize our work. And so when I talk about commercial opportunity, we're really talking about something that is concrete and near term rather than something which is aspirational. As a business, we're well funded. We closed FY21 with $27.6 million at bank, and we run very, very lean. We're an extremely streamlined business. We don't have expensive manufacturing facilities and labs and so on. So that money sees us through really all of the work that we're focused on doing for the foreseeable future. So we're in great shape financially as a business, and as I say, with partnering revenue in the first half to augment that. And finally, I really want to stress that we're late in the game as a company. As I often like to point out, our Paxallasim program is now in phase 3. It's approaching rapidly the point where this could be launched into the market. This could be a commercial pharmaceutical product within about 2 to 3 years. And that's very, very near term for a drug. We really have, we're really getting close to the business end of this. So this is not a company that's still stuck in early stage development, still in the lab. This is a company that's rapidly heading towards commercialization of its lead program. And I think that's really where things get tremendously exciting for investors. Next slide, please. I've just summarized here, for those who are new to the story, a really brief snapshot of the company's history. Kazia is, for practical purposes, about a 4 or 5-year-old company. And although we're still a young company, we've seen some dramatic growth in that time. As you can see here at the left-hand end of the slide, we started out very much with negligible enterprise value. We're now a business valued in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And that's been driven both by our building our pipeline, bringing in both the Paxallasim and more recently EVT-801 assets, But it's also been driven by some of the important clinical milestones we've delivered along the way. In the short life of Kazia, we've really done an enormous amount of work, and that's really started to prove the company to our stakeholders and to really build awareness both here and internationally. Next slide, please. I've summarized here the 2 drugs that we're working on, and time doesn't really permit today a detailed explanation of how these drugs work and how we're developing them. There's a huge wealth of information around that on our website, and I'd really encourage people to focus there. But in a brief summary, we have 2 drugs that we're working on, as I mentioned. Paxallasim is our lead program. And you can see here that covers about the top 2/3 of the slide. It's the red section here. Glioblastoma is our primary focus for that drug. As I mentioned, it's the most common and the most aggressive form of brain cancer. And we are in a pivotal study, a phase 3 study, a registration study for that drug. At the moment, it's running in the United States, but that will shortly expand to Europe and to China. But as I touched on earlier in the presentation, we do have a lot of work going on in other forms of brain cancer. DIPG is a rare childhood brain cancer, but a devastating disease for families that are affected. And we're just completing a phase 1 study there, just about to start a phase 2 study. Primary CNS lymphoma, another form of brain cancer that we have very, very high hopes for with this drug. And then several studies ongoing in brain metastases. That is brain cancer that is spread from elsewhere in the body, lung cancer, skin cancer, breast cancer. When they spread to the brain, they become very, very difficult to treat. And we're looking at the potential for our drug to provide benefit there. So this is a very, very broad clinical program, a lot of work ongoing, 10 clinical studies currently active. And as you can see on the right of that slide, some extraordinary collaborators. Some of these are really among the top cancer hospitals in the world. Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Absolutely top tier centers that are not just participating in these studies, but in many cases partially funding them also. And then in the bottom part of the slide, you see our new asset, EVT-801, just about to enter a phase 1 human trial. And we just actually received some great news this week. The regulatory agency has approved that study. We're moving into a phase of taking that study live over coming months. Next slide, please. I'll just say a very brief word about how we work as Kazia. We're not a company that's based on proprietary intellectual property that we've developed. And in that sense, we're an unusual example in the Australian landscape, although perhaps not so unusual in international terms. Our business model is to look for really great drugs which are not strategic for their parent companies. We bring them into our company, we take them through development, and then we partner them out for commercialization. The advantages of this approach are several. It's hugely more cost effective, it's much quicker for investors, and it takes away a lot of risk because it means that our drugs fundamentally are invented and taken through early development by some of the best names in the business. Both of our drugs reflect this strategy. Paxallasim was invented by Genentech, the most successful developer of cancer drugs in history. And then EVT-801 has been invented by Sanofi, the largest French pharmaceutical company, and then taken through early development by Evotec, a European company. So these drugs have had some incredibly high quality work put into them by some very, very experienced and very successful companies. For various reasons, they didn't fit with those companies' strategies, and that's a common thing in this industry. So we've brought them into our company, we're taking them forward, and we've already begun the other part of this journey, which is to partner them out for commercialization. So earlier this year, we announced a deal with Simcere Pharmaceutical in China for Paxallasim. They're going to take it forward in China. They've paid us $11 million US, up to $281 million US in milestones, and then mid-teen royalties on commercial sales. So a fantastic deal for Kazia and a great way to take our drug into China. We still retain rights for the remaining 92% or so of the world. So we'll be talking to other companies about opportunities there in due course. Next slide, please. Just a brief word on our financials. You can see here the last 12 months or so of the company's share price. Really productive second half to last year, driven by some great data readouts and some regulatory milestones. A slightly quieter first half to calendar 2021, but really we're just building up to some of the work that we expect to be sharing in the second half of this year. Investors who bought into the company on 1st of July 2020, by 30th of June 2021 had nearly trebled their money. And we sit today at a market cap of somewhere around $180 million. I think in the days since the slide was made, we've gone up a little bit. And I think the point was made earlier that you can judge a biotech company to some extent by the quality of its investors. And we're really fortunate to have some terrific world-class institutional investors on our registry, which you can see here in the bottom right of the slide. And then just finally, next slide, please. Just a brief word on what we have coming up. This has been an interesting year for us. The first third or so of the year was dominated by some partnering transactions. The middle third of the year, in many ways, has been the behind the scenes work to start up and to drive forward clinical trials. The final third of this year, the months between now and the end of calendar 2021, are dominated, in a word, by data. When you have as many clinical trials running as we do, it means a lot of readouts. And so we're expecting a number of data readouts. We'll be starting new studies. We'll be sharing some important progress updates on the work we're doing. And I think that's going to make it a really exciting few months ahead for Kazia shareholders. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. It's been great to talk, and really welcome any questions.
Thanks, James. And we do have a few questions. Firstly, there you talk about the significant milestones that are coming up over the next 12 months. Are there any you believe investors should pay particular attention to?
Yes, I think there's two things I'd really highlight. One is with Paxallasim, and that is that we'll be seeing initial data in some new uses of the drug. Everything we've reported so far for Paxallasim has been around glioblastoma, the particular form of brain cancer that's our primary focus. But over the next few months, we should be in a position to share data about some other forms of brain cancer. And that's going to be the first time we've really been in a position to talk about the use of the drug here. So that's going to be really interesting. Second thing is going to be taking EVT-801 into the clinic. From a practical point of view, that's the point where analysts start valuing drugs. It's the point where investors start to look at us as a diversified portfolio rather than a single asset. And so I think that's actually going to be an important inflection point for the company. And then the third thing I always touch on is just those X factor things that can come up, these regulatory milestones, partnering activities, all those sorts of things, which are much more contingent in nature, but can really change the game very suddenly for a company like ours.
And EVT-801 is kind of your second asset, and you've moved quickly to get that into clinical trials. What do you hope to see in the results from that trial?
Yeah, well, initially, clinical trials for the first round of clinical trials for any new drug, which we call phase 1 trials, focus primarily on the safety and the dosing, really kind of understanding just how to use the drug. But we're going to be building into this some really, really cutting edge work to also show the activity of the drug in the tumor. We're going to be looking at how it modulates the immune system. We're going to be looking at how it slows tumor growth. We're going to be looking at how it changes the circulation around the tumor. So we've got a very, very sophisticated study that we're launching, which is going to go far beyond a typical phase 1 cancer study. And that should give us a much earlier read on the potential efficacy of the drug. So this is a really exciting study, one I'm super excited to be part of. And I think it should give investors useful information much earlier than would normally be the case.
And James, given your business model, can we expect to see kind of additional compounds added to your pipeline in the near future?
Tim, look, we set a really high bar for what we bring into the pipeline. You know, both Paxallasim and EVT-801 are just absolutely world-class drugs that have been developed by, you know, as I said earlier, 2 of the best companies in the business. And there's not a million drugs around that meet that standard. And right now, we've got our hands pretty full with these 2 fantastic programs. But in the medium to long term, I think some cautious expansion of our pipeline is absolutely something we consider. I think right now we're in the nice position that we've got plenty to work on. We've got a nice diversified portfolio. We've got cash to run all the things we want to do. But you know, as we get more runs on the board, I think we keep in the back of our mind the possibility of getting bigger.
And there's a question here, good question. Where do you see your biggest risks?
Well, look, the risk of any drug at this stage in development is that you don't see the results in your phase 3 study that you expected to see from your earlier studies, and that just goes to the territory. Unfortunately, that's biotech. But we've done everything we can to try and reduce that risk. We've really very closely mirrored our approach between our phase 2 studies and our phase 3 studies. We've really kind of stress tested the data. We've got a lot of results that show the underlying activity of the drug through novel imaging technologies and things like that. So we've done everything we can to reduce that risk. You can never reduce it to zero. If we could, we'd probably be a very much more valuable company than we are today. But we've done everything we can to make sure we don't get any surprises as we move forward.
And just quickly, it's a back of the envelope sort of question here. You spoke about a 1.5 market size, 1.5 billion market size for your lead drug. Assuming it passes phase 3 trials, what sort of revenue would you look to expect in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, look, Tim, the honest answer is we stand potentially to be the first new drug approved for glioblastoma in more than 20 years. There's one existing FDA-approved drug for this disease, a drug called temozolomide. Doesn't work great. That was $1 billion a year product for Merck, which is the company that invented it, before it lost patent protection. And we're targeting basically all the patients that don't respond to that drug. So there's every chance that we can command a very substantial share of that commercial market. Difficult at this stage to give you an exact percentage, but there really are not any other treatment options for these patients. Let's say one FDA-approved drug, not a great success. So this is up for grabs. This is not like lung cancer where there's been 20 new drugs in the last decade. This is a disease that is crying out for new therapies. And you know, we think that if we're successful in what we're trying to do, there's a huge commercial opportunity here.